Okay, folks, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. If you're still at the bar, get another beverage and come on in. I guess it's okay to get up and get a beer during, but yeah, but as long as you come back. Yeah, you guys, and just like time out, beer. Jamie, you're actually our official runner. So if we need refills.
We're mic'd. We can speak from outside. It's not a problem.
Oh, that's true. That's true. They can hear us throughout. So, well, thank you all for coming. I know that the beer cart, I thought it was going to be a cart, but it's an actual full-service bar, which is pretty awesome. Is a great draw. So thank you all for being here. How many of you had the free as in beer stickers, and that's why you're here? Yes. Awesome. Cool. Good. I'm glad that worked out. So we've got a pretty interesting, pretty fun panel today. We're going to try to keep it pretty light. I know that we're the last thing between you and the baseball game. That's why we went ahead and did the bar now. So we're not the last thing between you and the bar. Because I hate that feeling when you're at a conference or attending something. So what we're going to talk about is the idea of the consumerization of IT and how that's impacting the federal government and state, local, wherever in the government folks are, and the digital transformation that organizations are having to undertake. The reality is that today our users and consumers and citizens are near expert level consumers of technology. They're using the Gmails, the Facebooks, and all of those things with regularity, and they've come to expect that that's the way IT systems work. You often will hear, well, my internet connection at home is faster than the one at work. I know in the Tyson's Corner office, we can all attest to that. Mr. Smith, thank you very much. So that sort of experience is what we're really trying to get around, is how do we build systems and infrastructure in a way that responds to our customer base in the way that they're used to using technology. Everybody's got a tablet at home. Everybody's kid has a tablet at home. They couldn't tell you the last time that Facebook went down, but they can tell you the last time your IT systems went down. So how do you begin to design around that problem? And we've got some great experts in the field. We're going to go straight down the line here. Scott Van Velsor, architect with Accenture Federal Services. Thank you very much for being here.
Absolutely.
Great. John Coble of SAIC, a fellow.
Hi there.
Thank you very much. And Peter Levin is the CEO and former senior advisor to the CTO at VA of Amida Technology Solutions today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So let's do a quick State of the Union, right? Let me know where you are within your organization. We'll start down here. Within your organization on the path to digital transformation, and really what's on the horizon.
Sure. So we jumped into it. Of course, we've been doing it for a little while. I think digital is an interesting concept in a lot of ways because it's been around for a while, but only been more recently coined. But we established a digital design studio in DC about a year ago now, a little less than a year ago, with a focus on getting things delivered faster and getting better features to our clients and customer, the general citizens of the United States. Everything faster, better features, better capabilities, and a lot more focus on getting technology to actually work for consumers as opposed to making consumers work with the federal government. We focus on simplicity, basically simple solutions that we can bring into place, focus on having very evidence solutions in the sense of people want to have transparency and they want to be able to be involved in technology. They want to be able to use it on this platform, use it on that platform, get it all together. And customizations are a huge thing as well with a lot of folks. They generally want their experience to be like Facebook. They want their experience to be like Twitter. They want to be immersed in the technology, even though they might be doing something maybe not as exciting as working on a federal thing, whether it be submitting your taxes or something like that. They want that experience to be no different than their experiences on all their other different mobile platforms, tablet platforms, things of that nature.
Actually, submitting my taxes was kind of like being on Facebook during election season. That's sort of the way that felt. Just really bad experience. So, Peter, how about you guys? What's your state?
Good. So let me talk a little bit from the context of my former job
Sure.
when I was at Veterans Affairs and touch a little bit about what we're doing now. So when we got to VA, there was effectively no consumer-facing digital infrastructure whatsoever. The website was horrible. Registering for benefits was effectively impossible, very paper-based. And if you were receiving federal health services from VA or from DoD, there was actually no way to gain access to, never mind the scandal that you might know about with the appointments. Even if you got an appointment, there was no way of getting that data. So we had a very broad mandate at that time from the president and from the secretary to change it, right? And it was a target-rich environment. So fast forward now 8 years later, If you're a veteran, you can get your complete longitudinal health record through a process called Blue Button. That has now become the most widely used personal health record in the United States, not just at VA, 600 other companies. If you're getting health services from Aetna or from United Health Group, they also have it, and many of the Blues do as well. If you're trying to register for benefits, whether it's Agent Orange disabilities or other kinds of service-connected disabilities, that's all now automated. It's an almost paperless process. A GI Bill now completely automated as well. So we really moved the ball from almost entirely manual to almost entirely digital. And that was really just a question of will. I mean, obviously the technologies were there, and there was an expectation that many of the veterans had from their experiences with Facebook and Twitter. So what we now are doing now in 10 seconds or less, we are really focused now at Amida on the security of these things, making sure that we're doing good identity management and that the enterprise infrastructure is following best practices and effectively a big compliance, so we have some tools for that.
Right. And you had a small hand in that Blue Button activity, right?
I had a small hand in the Blue Button activity.
Great, that's
yes.
awesome. No,
Yes.
I know that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and talking about the consumerization of IT and stuff, and we've heard from the front end process, if you will, of how that's impacted. And you know, I'll give an example in SAIC, in our logistics supply chain business that we do with DLA. We do about $650 million a year in automating that supply chain for DLA. And on the back end, you know, on the front end, we talk about the cell phone connections, doing everything with their iPhones or Android phones, and instead of just dedicated scanners, for example, in the warehouses and logistics. And on the back end, what we're seeing is, you know, about 7, 8 years ago was, you know, when Agile came out, and everybody's, you know, saying, hey, we got to figure out how to do these applications faster. And then, you know, 3 years ago, it became DevOps. And what we're seeing is not only from the front end, from the consumer side, but we're seeing the technologists internally wanting to emulate Apple, Facebook, Google, and bringing those agile DevOps practices into our IT services. So we're seeing it from both sides, which is kind of interesting also.
Yeah, that's interesting. So we've heard a couple of different drivers, right? So you had internal drivers,
Right.
which is interesting. Peter, you had customer drivers, right? And your drivers were more
More on the client side, more on the federal side. Basically, they know that the consumers want this stuff, so they're bringing it to them and getting it to them before they beg for it or demand it, if you will.
And as sort of demand continues to be generated, where are you seeing that demand generation? Contractual? Like what are you seeing sort of at the procurement level? What's coming?
Yeah. At the procurement level, we aren't seeing contracts yet that specify DevOps, for example. We are seeing contracts that specify Agile. And we've been doing Agile, like I said, for 7 or 8 years. And you know, we perfect it over time and every year. But I would suspect that with all the interest that we are seeing in DevOps, and we write back to DevOps in our responses, but we aren't seeing it contractually in the requests coming out yet. But
Yeah, I mean, a couple sides, and this is going to go, Peter.
Please.
Sorry. A couple sides we see it is people want to solve their problems differently than they did before. They don't want to continue to maintain that system that's falling over and having challenges, or the capability that it's a website from 1995 and we're just keep pumping the money into it and keeping it going. We see contracts that are coming our way of help us solution this, help us figure out how to do this better and do this in a different way and make it an actual a better solution. And then we also see it on the DevOps side. So Agile's been big. DevOps is now, we know that we want to be able to build all these things quickly, and we know that we want the consistency and the delivery excellence that comes with putting a DevOps solution in place. And that's where we're basically seeing a lot of people coming to us and saying, how do I do DevOps? How do I get that? Because I hear that's really, really good. So it's a little bit of doing a little education on DevOps and getting them on understanding what they can get out of DevOps, understand the roadmap that DevOps is going to put them on, but then be able to realize those capabilities. So we see it on both sides of it.
Right?
So at VA, I would say we're a little bit behind the times. If you look at some of the RFPs that have been out, you're not really seeing the kind of consumer-driven requests. It's much more institutional than at least subjectively I would want to see. But it is changing. It's absolutely positively changing. And I think the beautiful thing about VA, and we can talk about this even after the election from last year, is it's really a nonpartisan issue, right? People, nobody's going to argue about the quality and the entitlement of those services. So we're still kind of working our way through that right now, and folks like me who used to write the requirements from the government side are now helping the government write the requirements, and I'm seeing a much broader aperture even than I did when I was in the job. But I personally would love to see a more consumer-centric, in this case veteran-centric, approach to the kinds of things that they're buying.
Mm-hmm. So these new approaches, agile, DevOps, they're really a lifestyle change, right? From an IT and from a business perspective, and that can be fairly difficult. What were some of the cultural issues that you might have run into? Peter, I know you're chomping at the bit for this one, so we're going to start with you.
How much time do we have? and can I get a beer first? Good. It's complicated. So it's so easy to sit here on a stage, a few years out of the job and say, oh, it's everything sucks and they never cared and it's a bunch of government bureaucrats who are just watching the clock and waiting for their retirement. And I met that guy, right? I know exactly who you're talking about, and he's an idiot, and I wish he would have been fired a long time ago, right? But my point is that that's really not the endemic culture, right? There's really a bunch of people who do want to do the right thing, and for either procedural reasons or perceived bureaucratic reasons, they feel stuck, they feel congested.
You don't take a government job for the great pay. You take it because you love the mission.
Exactly.
I truly believe that.
I personally believe that too. So this really, at the end of the day, came down to enlightened leadership. In my case, that was Secretary Shinseki and Deputy Secretary Gould, that basically saying, your job is to never say no. Like, that was the instruction in the small group when we found out. Your job is to figure out a way to get to yes. And that amplifies, that grows. So fast forward to today, there are a lot of folks, there are pockets of excellence inside of the VA where, if I was sick, I wish I could go there, right? I mean, you get absolute quality services. It's very, very digitized, and the things that are still missing are some folks who are, I would say, reluctant even to evolve to agile, and they literally don't know what DevOps is yet, right? They haven't kept up with it, but that's changing, and I think you're going to see an acceleration under Secretary Shulkin.
Yeah, that's great. Culture.
Yeah, I think on the cultural side, one of the challenges is that we'll get a contract, agile DevOps delivery, and we'll start performing and executing against that, and all of a sudden we'll say, but they'll say, where's the PDR, where's the CDR, all of the quality checks that they want from that, waterfall approach, and they want to know, okay, tell me up front 100% of the requirements, tell me the budget, and it's that command and control that they're not willing to, in a lot of cases, the agencies aren't willing to give up, or they're not sure how to shift to it.
Right.
So they ask for the delivery model, and we start delivering product on a very fast basis, and minimally viable product and stuff, but they're not sure how to deal with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you guys have built a center of excellence, right? And you're like, hey, check out what we're doing.
We do like the term center of excellence.
Yeah. So talk to me about the culture fit there, right?
I'm going to reference back to the talk I was just in with Jennifer Krieger, I believe is her name. She just talked about the challenge of merging the two groups that were developing Atomic and OpenShift together and bringing them together and actually building it, turning them into an agile workforce, taking them from a little more traditional and putting them together. And that took a couple of years. So I look at it as if you have technologists that are just in and day out doing this stuff, and they're focused on technology, their inputs are technology, their outputs are technology, and it takes them a couple of years. Getting a traditional, baked-in federal agency, and don't get me wrong, a lot of them are very much pushing forward in the DevOps area and as well as in Agile. But getting them to do that shift is really, really hard. So a lot of what we see is the cultural shift happens as arguably a lot of the new contracts. So if a new contract comes out and it's focused on DevOps, focused on Agile, that's where we see a lot of our clients that are saying, I get it, I'm putting this in the contract because that's what I want and that's where I'm going to go. And they're a lot more geared to getting it. Existing contracts, ooh, it's a tough one. Taking you out of that mindset of, well, we're going to do a release every year, right? That's what we're going to do. Every year in March, we're going to put a release in. It's hard to get them out of that mindset. I'm going to give you resources at this point in time. You're going to get this. You're going to have this delivered. It's really hard to get out of that mindset. So it's a challenge, but it's also a challenge for us to basically try to do as much Agile as we can, right? Call it pseudo-Agile, but as Agile as we can on those kinds of contracts so that we can actually get some of the value of the Agile discipline, the Agile concepts, even though we're continuing to do that waterfall iterative model.
We've kind of or coined the term agile fall for operating in that type of model, if you will.
The
And
budget
it starts to
cycles.
ease them into it, though.
Yeah, the budget cycles are designed around that,
Well,
right?
yeah,
So it's
yeah.
difficult to
Correct.
sort of engage. So that's,
Absolutely.
we're gonna have to. I think there's a lot of sort of education at the procurement level as
Yeah.
well. That's gonna have to happen. So Peter, talk to me a little bit about open source health records and sort of where we are with Ocera now that DoD and VA are looking at sort of COTS or vendor supported as opposed to Ocera.
Yeah.
Where's that positioning us?
So the short version of the story is that I don't think the VA has actually made a decision yet.
Okay.
And even if they decide to go to a COTS-based product, that's something that's still very many years away. If you look at what's going on right now with Project Genesis, which is the COTS procurement inside of the DoD for the medical health services, they've moved off of something that was derivative of the VA system into a Cerner product. That's a slog, right? It's a little bit more expensive than they thought it was going to be, and it's a little bit behind schedule, and you have some extraordinarily difficult data continuity, longitudinal data access continuity of care issues that have not been resolved. This would be a non-starter at the VA. Like the whole purpose of the VA is to make sure that you have continuity of care. So, so with that background, I'm personally super confident that Ocera will have a permanent role, and we can debate. I've got an opinion about this, about whether it's sort of literally a leadership role or more on a facilitating or an implementation back end. Anything that any commercial vendor wants to do typically already has to go through Ocera for I don't want to call it a certification process, but it's a compliance issue, right? You know, will this work with Vista or not? And you don't want to do this on the production system. You want to do this in the sandbox. So no matter what happens, there's going to be an Ocera, and I think that's a great thing. What happens next, I think, is really anybody's guess. If you stay with I would say, the enlightened debate, I think that there's really, really good arguments on both sides. People are really concerned about VA's ability to implement and execute. There are a lot of people at VA that don't know what DevOps is. On the one hand. On the other hand, there is no such thing as a commercial solution that comes out of the box and you just tinker with it and deploy it. You know, why don't you ask the DHA folks how they're experiencing it? So long story short, Ocera is well-funded. They've got a great team. For those of you that keep score this way, they've just delivered FileMan. It's been a tremendous success. There's a test and certification role that they're going to play no matter what the procurement looks like. And we'll see whether VA actually can take some of the components that they already have, like EHMP, and use that as the data continuity layer, and then allow some of the commercial applications to plug in. That would be, from my perspective, the best way. Or whether they actually go and they wholesale rip it out, put something in. That's going to be a long process. We're going to need an Ocera for the next 10 years.
Right,
Yeah.
right. You guys have thoughts on that? And
Not
I think
as-
it's
not
a
as-
data interop conversation, right? And what we're talking about is risking an entire generation of medical records being locked into a system or more
Yeah.
that are inextricable, right? So
We're
this
not
is-
going to risk it.
Right.
Yeah.
But,
It's just not-
no,
it's
but
not
that's,
gonna happen,
that is
yeah.
the implication on,
Yeah,
on the
exactly,
outside, right? So
I can't speak to the medical records, but it is that factor of DevOps that basically allows, as you say, it's basically educating them on DevOps and bringing that back around. It is one of those things where that's the kind of solution that you want to basically ensure that you've got those concepts in place. So as you're building that, as you're unifying so many different organizations around one thing, you basically are putting that in place. But yeah, no, I personally don't have as much involvement in that other than conceptually.
right. So here we are, day 104 of the new administration. And the last administration had some pretty great initiatives, right? We had cloud first, we've got the open source code policy, and a lot of default to open types of things. On the horizon, and it's really hard to even speculate on what this administration is going to do from that perspective. They're still forming a lot of those teams. What do you guys see on the horizon, sort of coming out of this administration with some of the announcements that they've made most recently?
I'm concerned, right? I don't think that there's a predisposition against open source. There is obviously a predisposition against open data, which is a problem. And I would say it's a very serious problem. There isn't anybody right now, at least in the White House leadership, and I can speak a little bit to VA still, that understands really at the political level what it is. And let's not even talk about open source. Let's talk about open APIs, right? We're having lots of conversations. I literally bring in a power cord, right? This is a plug, this is a socket, this is how this works, right? And imagine doing this with software. So I would say I'm concerned but not freaked out. I do think that there is big business, and some of the larger companies are very effective at convincing either the Hill or the White House, and hey, open source is dangerous, or open source is insecure, or open source isn't proven in the enterprise. Things that are fact-based wrong, right? But in a world of alternative facts, that doesn't always carry. But all that notwithstanding, whether there's a setback in the near future, which I'm not predicting, but I'm preparing myself for, even emotionally, never mind commercially, that there might be a setback, truth will out. And these guys, I play for the blue team, obviously. These guys are ultimately pragmatists. And even if they don't go in the way that I think most people in this room would want them to, I think that they eventually will. I think they're going to recognize that any other alternative is too expensive, or you're not going to get what you want as quick as you want, or it's not going to have the functionality that you need, or you're leaving it for the next guy to extricate themselves from the trap that you're putting them in. I don't actually think they're going to do that.
I agree.
Playing on that, I think it's going to be slower and longer until we find out what the real ramifications are. And one of the things that I look towards or look to and concerns me is there were good ties between the tech community and the last administration. There are not good ties between the tech community and the new administration.
Yeah.
And so, that just doesn't feel good.
I think those are bonds that can be reforged. I do think that. I mean, we've got, and I know not everybody, go ahead.
Let me jump into that. So
Yeah.
my biggest concern, honestly, is that they're going to undo the open source direction.
The initiative.
Because it was created under the previous administration. Not because they have any general interest, but because it was created under the previous administration. So they're just going to undo it and say, yeah, we don't want that.
Yeah.
I mean, my technologist hat says open source is everything. I love open source. I hate paying for software. So my technologist hat says it has to be open source, whether it's code reuse within the government, whether it's actually making it open and pushing it out, taking the 20% approach with the pilot program they have. Love it, love it, love it. My corporate hat says, I'm not giving away my code. I'm a contractor. I wrote my code. That's our IP. That's ours. And so I feel like what's going to happen is that the new administration is going to be a lot more, as you said, influenced by the corporate culture that says, well, this is the way we've done business, and this is the way it works, and we need to hold on to our code, hold on to our assets, and that's generally IP, arguably at the end of the day. So let's rescind that policy and maybe take a different approach to it, whatever it might be.
May I speak to that
Of
very
course,
briefly? Just super quick. So I agree with everything that Scott just said, but if you look at what's happening at the agency level, and let's talk about the two biggest ones, at DoD, Secretary Mattis is not undoing this, right? Secretary Mattis, before he was secretary, was part of the Center for New American Security. He was one of the primary targets, one of the primary sponsors of an open source report from CNAS. He approved that, right? He likes that. He's not at the secretarial level going to back 1 millimeter away from what was in that report. If you look at Secretary Shulkin, same idea, right? The guy is ultimately a pragmatist. He understands the role of open source. Vista is open source. I don't think that we're going to move away, at least in the two places that I know best. Now, could there be some administrative mandate or lack of energy? Obviously, I think we're seeing that already. But I'm slightly more optimistic. I don't want to say that you're wrong, but I'm slightly more optimistic.
Oh no, I hope I'm wild. But I agree. I completely agree with you. Right? It's agency to agency, and some agencies completely embrace it. No, this is what we need. We know how we do business, and this is how we do business. But it's like without that push for some of the other agencies or some of the code reuse aspect within the government itself, in the sense of who has a backup solution. I've got one. Would you like to share it with me? That kind of stuff is like so helpful in the sense of versus just burning the money and burning the money.
100% agree with that. Yeah.
We have the opportunity, though, sort of from the outside, where we can build communities and invite the government to participate, right? So we had the security guides on just the presentation before this, and that's where the SCAP security guide comes in. That's where the NSA, that's where DISA, everyone works together. We're actually working with 18F on some of their compliance masonry stuff. So I think that there are opportunities for industry for us to continue to sort of shine that light. I also think there's a great book of case history, right? So you've got the DoD open source FAQ, which is incredible. It's a great resource for people who have questions about open source in the government. So I think that case history.
Yeah, and you talk about bringing change to government and stuff, and your innovation labs
Right.
are a prime example that could be the tip of the spear, as they say.
We think so. I mean, we're really proud of that. So I want to two more questions because I hear we're down to just 10 minutes, which is amazing. And I will tell you what we accomplished when we're done. I'm not yet going to ruin it. So I want to talk about sort of the interaction with your customers. How has that fundamentally changed with these new development styles and sort of being more responsive to their needs?
Well, trying to just embedding the customers into the whole agile life cycle, if you think about it, and say, you are a product owner, and we're going to build, you're going to live with our team day in and day out for a period of time, and we're going to suck the knowledge out of your brain and put it in, bring it to life in code. And that's both new, it's exciting, and it's also worrying on their side, because it's you're asking them to play a new role that they're not accustomed to.
Yeah.
But when you find those people that are passionate and dedicated, they embrace it, and they're like, "Wow, I wish we would have been doing this 20 years ago."
Right. Right. Absolutely, Scott.
There's a lot. There's definitely the agile. It's such a culture shift. It really is. But one of the things I mentioned our digital studio earlier. So what we've targeted is give me your problem, right? And then we'll do a little bit of homework. We'll throw an agile team at it. They'll work through your problem, think of different solutions for it, bring you into the studio, and then we'll work together, find some solutions, and then maybe that turns into something from a perspective of maybe something they're going to chase. Maybe it doesn't. But the whole idea is bringing the technology forward, so to help solve those problems, and that's where we see a lot of the interactions now. Is people just didn't realize they could solve their problem that way, or they didn't realize that there was another way to solve it versus another 5-year contract. So it's bringing a lot more those ideas ahead. I mean, and if we're able to chase something down with them, or they're able to chase something down to basically get to their mission, even better. So it's just helping them out.
Yeah. Peter?
Let's go to the next question. I think we had better answers here.
Okay. All right. Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. One other thing I want to talk about is you've got developers sitting down with business people now having an understanding of what they're writing and why. And how does that impact sort of developer satisfaction? Do happy cows make happy pigs? Like, is that actually a thing?
Yeah, in California it works. I remember a business person or a senior person that told me years ago, maybe 20, 30 years ago, said, it's really difficult to write good code if you don't know what it's supposed to do.
Right.
And in the old days, we would go through and think about a 10-year project. You would go through a requirement phase of 12 to 18 months on the front end. By the time you get through your system tests, let's just say on a very 10-year program, you're in year 6 or 7 out there.
Right.
The world's changed completely.
Right.
So the developers now know what they're part of the agile life cycle, and the customers are living with us. So they, if they don't see what they're supposed to get in the next, daily, then there's that recalibration. There's that feedback loop that happens very quickly. Right. And it makes the developers happier. Yeah.
So I'm going to try to thread a needle here because I really do believe in the federal service, and I really do believe in the people who have dedicated their careers to that. And it gets back to something I said originally, which was at the beginning of this conversation, which was that they just don't know, right? So we're coming in and we're explaining to them what even the art of the possible is. And they're like, wait a minute, I didn't even know that you could do that. And this is especially true on the security side, which is where we do a lot of our work, where we're explaining to them, what is a SIM, right? And what do you mean beaconing out? And what do you mean collecting that? And what do you mean automating those kinds of alerts? These are a lot of things. And VA is actually quite good at this. But even within the operations of the VA, there are a lot of folks that don't understand what the art of the possible is. So there's a tremendous satisfaction when you can show somebody, whether they have a checkbook or not, like you've just taught somebody something that they didn't know, and that's going to actually help make the infrastructure more secure. On the other hand, it's distressing, like how could you not know this, right?
Right.
But we tend to tilt towards the positive.
Yeah, no, that's great.
And one other thought is, there's so many silos within large organizations, within the government, and tearing down those silos is so hard. That's our infrastructure team. That's the team that runs this team. And so it's just so many different silos. And because of that, it's never-ending challenges. But the developer satisfaction comes when you're bringing them some of the tools, you're bringing them some of the concepts, and maybe the storage team latches onto them, maybe the network team says get away, but the idea is that you can definitely get some very, very good things coming out of the fact that that team's now adapted to them and bring it to the next team, and then the other team sees that and they can see, well, that's an obvious, but that's kind of how it has to be won, because top down is really, really hard to convince all those different silos to jump on board at the same time and plow forward. It's real tough.
Right. So now we're going to mention a very dirty word, failure. How have you guys sort of accepted failure? That's part of the agile lifestyle, is you accept failure and you move forward and you incorporate that learning. So tell me about some of the failure experiences that you guys have had in this process. And we don't always like to talk about those things, especially not within the government, so we're going to do it here.
Do you guys have, I can throw it in.
All right, let's go. Let's
Go
start.
ahead.
So, good.
Nobody wants to go first.
I'll go first. So one of the projects that we worked on that is, I would say now a success, but it was way more money than we expected and it took much longer than we said. So in some sense, you would, at least until a couple of years ago, you would have said that it was a failure, is a system called VBMS, which is the Veterans Benefit Management System. It used to be that if you had a service-connected disability, you would have to put this in on paper. VA had to accept it no matter, literally you could do it lipstick on a napkin and that was a claim, no joke. And then the average wait time was basically a year. Now, for some things, that's not a serious problem, but if you've had a dire injury in theater, in field, it can be a very, very serious problem, and they were basically all treated the same. So we've automated that, and so in the end, it's a success story, but I want to honor Adam's question. I don't think that the VA is unique or peculiar. This failure is horrible, right?
Absolutely.
And it gets even worse when you start talking about Agile, when you start talking about DevOps. You don't want to be the government, the civil servant, the career civil servant coming out of one of the top universities where the VA is aggressively recruiting from Carnegie Mellon, my alma mater, or from MIT, or from Stanford, or from UIUT, from the leading technology institutions, getting people to actually sign on with the passion for public service. And oh, by the way, the first thing you did was a screw up.
That's right.
And I'm your boss, and you just made me look like an idiot to my boss.
Yeah.
It's a huge problem, and it hasn't gone away, right?
Yeah.
So one of the benefits from 18F is that at least they said failure was possible. I think that they can speak very well to this, just saying. But within the institution, I don't think we've solved that cultural issue yet.
Yeah. Well, we talked about the feedback loops and having that fast feedback loop and being able to fail fast is the discussion point. And what I would say is from the technical side, we embrace that at the technical level, inside the project, not external at the customer, at the agency level. And so we, as part of our agile process, we say we want to fail fast. So if something's not working, let's find out this week, not next month, next quarter, God forbid at the end of the project.
Tell me Monday, not
Right,
status meeting Friday.
exactly.
Yeah.
So we do that internally from our development perspective, but we haven't cracked the code yet on how do you change that institutionally at the agency level.
How do you make it safe to fail?
Right,
If there's
right.
one thing I can say about Red Hat, it is safe to fail here. You're allowed to do that every now and again.
I probably don't have anything more to say on that one other than we definitely took a path of Agile with one of our projects, and we reoriented everything, changed the approach, drove down the path, fell all over the place. Once the requirements don't come fast enough, or
That's also a problem.
then the design's going to slow down, then the code's going to slow down, and what we end up is we'll do it in 3 weeks. We'll do it in 4 weeks, right? So what we found was that doing it on a large project doesn't work. Something with a ridiculous amount of complexity does not work. Doing it on the smaller ones, proving the value of it, then allowing you to start carving off those other ones. That's the only way. The only way I've seen it work, because it's either got to be implemented from the start, or when you're retroing it in, just take off the little pieces one by one and say, we're going to build this one Agile. That one will continue the long 9-month cycle.
Right. So incorporating back into Agile Fall, sounds like. by definition. Well, I want to thank the three of you for being here. This is awesome. I want to let you guys know we did an entire session today, and never once did we mention the word cloud. So that's our achievement.